Hello and welcome to the Sales Show. I'm Marie Kirkpatrick, your sales and business strategist. I'm a mum, a wife, and a multi-business owner myself. With over 15 years experience in sales and business, I have worked with startups all the way through to multi-million dollar companies. I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I love helping service-based businesses make an income as well as an impact. Let's jump into talking about all things sales and business. Hello and welcome back to the Sales Show. Today we are talking all things leadership. Now, leadership is something that I have struggled with a lot in my business. I always think, I'm a really good communicator, but sometimes I struggle to communicate exactly what it is that I need to do with my team and to really grow the business. So today I wanted to bring in the beautiful Mel Kettle. And let me tell you a little bit about Mel. Mel is a food-loving, book-reading beachgoer who lives on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia. She's a trusted mentor to many executives and leaders and is a highly sought-after speaker and trainer on leadership, communication, and menopause. After surviving the debilitating effects of work-related loneliness, stress, and burnout in her late 20s, Mel believes that self-leadership is essential for creating real connection and sustained engagement. Mel has also written two books. She's a best-selling author for Fully Connected and the Social Association, and she also hosts her own podcast, This is Connected Life. So go and check that out. But I've actually started reading Mel's book after she beautifully posted me one a couple of months ago, and I've absolutely loved it. It's really easy to get into. There it is. It's really easy to get into, really easy to read, and I found some really great tools to be able to implement into my business already. So welcome to the Sales Show, Mel. I'm so pumped to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much, Marie. It's so good to see your beautiful smiling face
Oh,
again. It's
stop
been
it.
way too long.
It has. It has. So tell me, how did you start off becoming falling into this leadership strategy role?
I've always been very strategic, and one of the words that was used the most to describe me when I was younger was pragmatic. I'm a really big believer in doing things for a reason and I've always been a planner. So even as a child, I was a planner. I'm not great with spontaneity, although I am getting a lot better at that. And I feel like there's too many people in life who don't plan enough, whether it's planning their lives so that they've got control over what they want their future to look like, or whether it's in business, whether you work for yourself or whether you work for someone else. And so my early jobs in my career were running conferences and events, and you cannot run a successful conference if you don't have a plan. You need a
Yes.
strategy in order
Yeah.
to get bums on seats. And so I worked in that industry for about 4 years. And then from there, I went to more marketing communication roles. And every job I ever had a very large strategic component to it, whether it was working as the marketing manager for the Brisbane Festival or working in communication roles in government. We needed to be making sure that what we did with our very limited resources was going to have the biggest impact. Or, as one of my old bosses used to say, we need bang for our buck because we
Yeah.
don't have many bucks. And so we need a big bang. And it's just so true.
Yeah. And I would say that there's probably a lot of people listening to this podcast that are business owners that want to get that bang for their buck, or they have limited resources, whether that's team, staff, time,
Yeah.
and they want to make sure that they're absolutely nailing it. And this is sometimes where I struggle in that sometimes my communication can be really direct. Sometimes people need more direction from me than what I think that they should, or anything along those lines. So can you give us a couple of key elements for effective communication, especially when it comes to from a business perspective?
Yeah, so when you're in business, you really want to be communicating with conviction, because when you're communicating with conviction, you come across as knowing what you're talking about. And so people are much more likely to listen to you and be motivated by you, be educated by you, and be inspired by you. And the key thing about communicating about leaders and people who communicate with conviction is that the people that they're communicating with are far more likely to do what they want. So whether that's buying from you, whether that's doing their job properly, whether that's understanding what their job is and how it impacts on the bigger part, on the bigger role of your organization. So as a leader, there's two parts, there's two elements of communicating with conviction. There's being strategic about it. So there's planning knowing what you want, knowing what motivates you, what drives you, what your overarching goals of your organization are. And then the other side of it is communicating with heart, as opposed to coming from a place of ego and all about me. So when we communicate with strategy and with a strategic intent, and when we communicate with heart, we're much more likely to bring people on, I hate the word journey, but on our journey with us.
Yeah.
Communicating with heart is things like showing empathy and being kind and listening to people and observing their behaviors so that you can see when they might be doing something that's not their normal.
And so, from a business perspective, I find that a lot of business owners that I work with are like, I want to be able to have someone to hit the ground running. And it's like they're expecting people to be able to walk into jobs or walk into a business that they know nothing about and, in inverted commas, hit the ground running. And I think, well, as a business owner and the leader that is driving the boat, that is not their job. Their job is to, yes, follow instructions and the systems and processes, but what does that really look like? And why do we all of a sudden expect people to just know exactly what it is that we want? And I feel like that comes down to the communication and the leadership of the business owner, right?
Yeah. One of the things I say the most is, do you expect me to have ESP? Like my husband will say to me, why didn't you do the blah, blah? And I'm like, because I didn't know you wanted it done. And he's like, well, why didn't you know that that I wanted you to do
Yeah.
that? And I'm like, because I don't have ESP. And I feel like a lot of employers expect their new hires to have ESP. And they just don't. Like, I mean, there might be a very rare few who do, but
Yep.
that's definitely not the exception, not the
Yeah,
norm, rather.
absolutely.
One of the things that I've really learned over through my time of both being an employee and being an employer is people take 3 to 6 months to get up to speed with a new job. And so you need to give them what they need in order to develop in the way that you want them to. And that includes your time. That includes your attention, and that includes some of your energy, because you need to really make sure, and this goes back to the hiring process as well. You need to make sure that you've got the right people, and you need to make sure that they have a very clear understanding of who you are as a leader, and also who your organization is. Like, what does your organization stand for? What are your organizational values? And what are the things that you expect from staff? When I hear that phrase, I expect you to hit the ground running, I just think, well, there'll be no training.
Yeah.
There'll
There's no
probably be no
processes or
conversation.
systems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. There'll just be this expectation that you know what you need to be doing without any guidance to make sure that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And they do, and especially in sales, right? People like, you should just know how to sell everything that comes through the door. Like, you should be able to step into any business and just sell it because you're a salesperson. I'm like, well, I need to understand what are the features and the benefits and why someone would buy from this company and what makes you different over competitors and unique selling points and all that sort of stuff. And the business is like, oh, I don't really have any of that documented, or I'm not necessarily clear on that. You should just be able to sell it.
Yep.
Such a downfall.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work that way. It's like I I've been a food blogger in my time and was often asked to review products, and very, very few did I say yes to. But when I would say, will you send me the product? They'd be like, well, you can buy it. I'm like, well,
Oh, wow.
no, I can't. Or, in different jobs that I've had, and you would have seen this as well, and with clients that I've served, clients that I've worked with who have wanted me to help them develop visions and values and strategies,
Mm.
when I've said the easiest way for me to get to understand your product or your service is for me to have a customer experience. Can you give me a code? And they're like, yeah, no, you don't
Yeah.
need a customer experience. I'm like, well, how do you expect me to work with you? And
Yeah.
it's the same with sales. It's the same with any kind of job, really. How do you expect your people to do the best they can for you when you don't give them the tools that they need it? And, if you're hiring a plumber, you'd give him or her a set of plumbing of tools. If you're hiring a carpenter, you'd do the same. When you're hiring somebody who uses their brain instead of more manual labor, why aren't you giving them the relevant tools? And that might be training. It might be time to really genuinely understand who you are and what your values are. I
Yeah.
know I had got a job quite a few years ago, and I did not get a sit down meeting with my boss until I'd been in there for 10 days.
Wow.
For 10 days, I couldn't really do anything because I didn't know what I was meant to be doing.
Yeah, I find that, well, back in the day, I feel like I'm completely unemployable now, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Oh, yeah, me
I
too.
don't think, yeah, I don't think I could go work for someone else. But I find that when I interview with people, I'm getting the lowdown on them as much as they're getting the lowdown on me, because
Yeah.
I'm not interested in working for people that don't light me up, that don't give me the guidance, the leadership, the growth that I'm looking for.
Oh,
Tell me,
absolutely.
what do you feel like, how can strong communication increase sales across people's businesses?
So I know when I'm buying something, I like to know the features and the benefits, but I also like to know, depending on what it is, that there's going to be an ongoing personal relationship with the person or the company. And I like to feel that we share common values. So quite a few years ago during an election campaign, there was a local service that I was needing, like I think I needed a carpenter or a plumber or something for my house. And I looked on a Facebook page to find the phone number for a guy who was recommended to me. And he was just spewing hatred about something that I agreed with. And I just thought, wow, I don't want you in my house with that
Yep.
energy. So you're a no. But I feel like one of the things that makes people feel heard is when you listen. And one of the biggest issues that I think a lot of organizations don't take on board is they don't listen to their customers.
Yeah.
So it's a question, like it really depends on what it is you're selling, whether you're selling something that is homogenous or whether you're selling something that's more unique. And if you're selling something that's more unique, then you really need to be able to demonstrate to people, why should they buy from you? What is it that you have that will make their lives easier or better that someone else doesn't have?
Even when you were talking about the listening thing, there are
Hmm.
so many people when they go to sell stuff aren't listening to what people are really wanting. They're trying to tell,
Yeah.
this is what you need, this is what you need, this is what you need, this is why you need it. And I've had moments where I've been in stores or been talking to someone and I'm like, this is what I'm looking for. And they're like, yeah, but, and then they go off on this little tangent over here. And I'm like, you're just not listening to me. Like, you're
Yeah.
not getting what it is that I'm looking for. And I
We,
think,
yeah,
yeah,
I totally agree with you. We were looking for someone to renovate our kitchen a few years ago, and I said, this is what I want. And one of the things I wanted was to remove the return that was in the middle of our kitchen that made it so tiny. And two of the three people who quoted kept the return in their design.
yeah,
And I said,
immediate
why?
bust.
And
Yeah,
they said, well, you'll have to repolish all the floors if you take it out. And I'm like, well, what's that? And that will be expensive. And I said, what's expensive? And they said $1,500. And I'm like, this is a $60,000 renovation. I think
yeah.
$1,500 to repolish the floors to get the kitchen I want is worth it.
But they've also not listened to, like, if they haven't given you that option, right? And it
Exactly.
happens so often when people sell it. They're like, oh, you probably don't want to do that because it's more expensive. Or they're telling people how to spend their money. I'm like,
Exactly.
stop freaking doing that.
And
Like,
one of the things that was really a really good experience for me with this process is the person who we ended up going with asked a lot of questions. And I feel like
absolutely.
that's something that we don't often do when we are selling to somebody. We don't sit and ask enough questions.
That
We
is,
don't
people that aren't trained in sales don't ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't ask them what's their biggest problem? What do you want this to solve? Like how will your life or your world or whatever improve if you've got this product
Yeah,
or if you
absolutely.
have this service?
Yeah.
And questions like what's stopping you from making the decision now?
Mm.
What do you need in order to pick me?
And wouldn't it be interesting if, like, two out of those three tradies or architects or whatever you got to come in and design your kitchen, if they just ask the question of, even if it cost you a little bit more to take out the island, would you be comfortable with that?
Oh yeah. Oh, it was the very first thing I said. I said
Game
when they
changer.
came in to do a site inspection before quoting, the first thing I said was this needs to go.
Yeah.
I don't want this. I want the space opened up, and this means that I've got a shoebox of a kitchen.
Yeah.
Well, the guy that we went with he sat down and he asked us questions for 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting, one of the things that he'd said to us, he said, I'm really happy to come and give you a quote, but I'd charge for that.
Yep.
And he charged us, I think it was 3 grand to come and give us a quote and to draw up a plan.
Mhm.
And I said, yep, I'm really happy with that because that shows that you're going to take the time to listen.
Absolutely. Even,
And he
yeah,
did. Yeah.
so I talk about a 7-step sales process. And if anyone's listening, mariekirkpatrick.com/7 steps. Step 2 is that discover and uncover. And you do not have permission to go any further in the sales process until you are so freaking crystal clear on what it is that that client is wanting. And even if that the two that didn't ask about the floor polishing, even if they'd gone back and said, I wonder if Mel's fussed about it costing an extra $1,500, they could have picked up the phone and called and said, hey, Mel, it's going to cost you this amount. Are you comfortable with that? Are you happy to go ahead? Or how about I present 2 different quotes, whether you choose to remove it or you choose not to.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Figure it out, guys. Figure it out. Tell me how you feel like authentic communication across team really builds a business, because I know that that's something you're quite passionate about, right?
Yeah, it is. And I'm not talking about authenticity in terms of sharing warts and all, but I'm talking about authenticity in terms of sharing enough about who you really are
Yeah.
so that the people you're working with in your team can get a sense of rapport and feel aligned with you. And there's so much research that shows when you believe you have a connection with another person, you're far more likely to do business with them.
Yeah.
And whether that's as an employee or whether that's as a customer. And I feel that so often leaders forget that. The three you were asking before about good comms, the 3 main things when it comes to comms is you have to ask questions, you have to listen, and you have to observe. When you do those 3 things in terms of demonstrating authenticity, it really helps build relationships. So, for example, one of my clients, I was in her office and we were doing a walk around after hours. And she was saying to me, this person sits at this desk and this person sits at this desk and this person sits at this desk. And I was asking her what her relationship was like with each of her staff. And we stopped at one person's desk and she said, I don't know very much about this person. And I looked at his desk and it was covered in Star Wars figurines. And I said, well, he loves Star Wars.
Yeah.
And she said, I don't understand Star Wars. And I said, well, if you want to get to know this guy better, you need to be asking him questions about Star Wars.
Absolutely.
And she said, I would not even know where to begin. And I said, let me tell you, this is what you do. Next time you come to talk to him about a work thing, you say, I'm really curious about these figurines on your desk. Can you tell me about them?
Yeah.
And so he will. And then you can say, why do you love Star Wars? And he will tell you.
Yeah.
And then each time you go back, there must have been 40 figurines. I said, you can ask a specific question about a different figurine each time.
You got
Who
at
is
least
this?
40
What
points
is
of
their
contact.
role? Exactly. And I said, look at all your other staff. Everybody's got personal things on their desk. And this was before COVID. So it made it, it was a bit easier in some ways.
Yeah.
But I said, this person's got 3 cat photos on her desk. Ask about the cats. This person's got a photo of a child. Ask about the child. And then during COVID or when we do online meetings, when you have cameras on, you can say, and I can say to you, what are those 3 posters behind you? Why are they important to you?
Absolutely.
I can see some books on your bookcase. There's a pink one in the middle that I can't quite figure out the title of. What is that? What's the one you've got highlighted? Why? Why is that important to you?
Absolutely.
Who gave you that plant that's behind you? There's so many things you can ask to get to know people. And then when they answer, you can share your stories.
I think it's so important to know about, especially with my team, when I bring them on board. Yes, I want to know about them from a work perspective, but I also want to know about them from an outside of work perspective. Do you have kids? What do you enjoy? Let's try that again. What do you enjoy doing on a weekend? How do you like to spend your time? What are you interested in? Because that for me builds that relationship and builds that connection. And I feel like the more connected a team is, the better it's going to function, right? But I also ask questions about what is the best way for me to communicate with them? How do they like to receive information? How do they like to receive feedback? Because I know, as I said before, I can be really quite direct, and it's not direct. My intention is never to upset people. But I also know that sometimes in the past I have, because I've just been like, right, we need to get this sorted. It needs to happen this way, and this way, and needs to happen right now. And people
Yeah.
would be like, Marie's mad at me. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I need to understand my communication levels as well as the person I'm talking to and mix those two together.
Yeah, I feel like asking questions about getting to know each other outside of the workplace is really important. But I feel like you need to be sharing about what you're doing outside of the workplace first so that they can get comfortable with sharing with you. I had a client a couple of years ago who had, it was the beginning of COVID, and she said to me, I'm concerned about this particular staff member. He's been an absolute gun and always reliable and always hit deadlines. And since we've been working from home, he's not. And I'm worried about him. And I said to her, do you know what his home situation is? And she said, no. And I said, I feel like you need to ask. You should find out. And here's some questions that you can ask him without, being invasive. And I said, the easiest way is to get him on a Zoom call with camera on so you can see the space he's in, and then you can ask him questions about that space. It turned out that in January of 2020, so 3 months before lockdown, he moved into a one-bedroom apartment with his new girlfriend, who he'd only been dating for about 8 or 9 months, and they had a kitten. And so they had a new pet, and he was in a new relationship, and he was in a one-bedroom apartment, and they were both working from home.
Yeah.
Is it any wonder that he started to not perform as she expected?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot in that,
There's a
right?
lot in that, isn't
Yeah.
there? Yeah. She had another client had a staff member who, again, just kind of wasn't performing. And she said to me, my client said to me, I know that there's a lot going on in her world, but I don't know what because she won't share anything with me. This particular client was going through a really ugly relationship breakdown that was going through the court system. And I said to her, what does your staff know about your current personal situation with the court? And she went, nothing. I've told them nothing. And I said, well, if you've told them nothing, and I've noticed your behavior's changed in the last 6 months because of this, you're a bit short, you're a bit straight, you're obviously
Yeah.
anxious. I feel like you need to tell them what's happening. Not what's and all, but just give them the big overview. And you can say something like, if you've noticed that I haven't been myself lately, it's because my partner and I have split up and we're currently going through the courts system. We're at mediation phase, but it's not working and we're going to have to go to court to, resolve and dissolve over the next couple of months. And I'm really worried about it. That's all you have to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that gives them understanding of your current situation, but it also might help them open up a little bit more about what's happening in their personal world, both good, bad, and ugly,
Yeah.
because you're sharing something that's really big for you.
Yeah. I know even over the past couple of months, we've had a lot going on in the back end. When I say the back end, I'm talking me personally with growing small humans, renovations, and then ending up with a mother-in-law that's been extremely unwell and taking that on. And I remember back in corporate days, it was like, no, you had to leave all your stuff at the door. There was no personal type stuff. And when it came to talking to my team, I knew that I had gone a little MIA and that things were a little bit all over the shop. And I was like, this is what's going on for me at the moment. I need extra backup for this. Or if you're needing this, maybe go to this option or this option first before you come directly to me. And really creating that humanization of work and life. But my question to you would be around, what do you feel like are those boundaries that you can put into that space? Because I've also had other people that if they kick their toe, they decide to take the day off work and they're just not reliable in that space too, right? So what would you consider as healthy boundaries and how do you keep those boundaries?
So, from a workplace perspective, your boundaries are made up with your systems and processes and policies and procedures and your strategy. So, that's the formal documentation that sets a boundary in your organization. So, if you're struggling with staff who aren't doing their jobs, then the first port of call is looking at your policies and procedures. Do you have any to begin with? Because I know a lot of small businesses don't.
Yep.
And what are they? And do your people know what they are and where they can find them? So, and then also looking at things like, what are your expectations when people don't take a day off work? What are your expectations in terms of how they tell you and how long they have off and what evidence they need to provide to say that they're genuinely unwell, if any? So much of these little things like stubbing your toe and taking a day off comes back down to the relationship that you've got with your people. How much do you trust each other? How much do you trust that they'll just get their job done? And is the stub toe a stub toe, or is it code for I need a mental health day?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the more you know your people, the more you know, love and trust each other, the more you'll be able to ask the difficult questions. One of the questions I used to always ask my staff when they had a day off is, when do you think you'll be back? Do you think this is just going to be one day, or do you think it's going to be multiple days? And I would always say to them, I don't actually care what the answer is. I just need to know from a workflow perspective. Because if it's multiple days, then the next question I'm going to ask you is, what do I need to get somebody else to do while you're not here?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the deadlines that you're facing? What's your workflow look like? And having a process to ask those questions means that that becomes your norm, your organizational norm. It sets an expectation that when someone calls in sick, if it's just that, they will then tell you potentially in advance how many days they think they'll be off or when they think they'll be back. Is it just today and everything's under control? Or is it, I think I might need the week because of this?
Yep.
Or I might be able to do half a day over the next few days just to finish a few things so that I'm not leaving you in the lurch, which is a real benefit of working from home. The other issue, I think, and the other challenge with illness, particularly in working from home, is that a lot of people will just push through when they are sick and not take the time to recover. And that's a whole separate issue. But from a boundaries perspective, if you've got a really clear strategy, so everybody knows what your organization is there for, what's your core purpose, what are your goals for the year, and what their role is in helping you achieve that. That's one great boundary area, because then they'll know that this is what we're doing, this is what we're focusing on and why, and it will give them a sense of purpose, which will give them a greater sense of achievement and joy at work. The second thing is having really clear policies and procedures that spell out, this is the behavior we accept around here. I've got a friend who worked for an organization and did something. She looked at the policy, she wanted to set up a side hustle, read all the policies and procedures, spoke to one of the co-CEOs, got the sign off. The other CEO went, nah, lost her shit, and said, we don't do that. And my friend said, but there's nothing in the policies and procedures. And she said, you should just know that as an employee.
Wow.
And she said, I don't have ESP. How would I?
Yeah.
And I got permission. And so think about, what are some of the questions you get and what are some of the assumptions that people might be making around things that are acceptable or not acceptable behavior. And then what are the consequences for the breach of those boundaries or those policies and procedures? Because there's no point in having a set of policies and procedures if there's no consequence for the breach.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you feel like are the biggest mistakes people make in regards to either setting those boundaries or lacking communication and leadership skills within their business?
They don't communicate them, or they only communicate them once, is the biggest problem. So quite a few years ago, I used to do a lot of social media strategies with a lot of my clients. So we'd look at who was responsible for managing the social media accounts of the organization, but also what was acceptable behavior on individuals, on staff members' personal social media accounts. What could they say about the company and what could they not say about the company? And so the things that you didn't want them to say were pretty obvious. Anything that was commercial, in confidence, anything financial, don't bitch about your staff, don't bitch about your colleagues, don't slag off the boss, those kinds of things.
Common sense, really.
Common sense, yes, common sense. There was one client who had a staff member who was deeply unhappy with working in this organization and who said a lot of bad stuff about the company, and there were minimal consequences.
Wow.
So you need to be really clear. But the other thing that happened with this organization is that they would only share the policy once. And this is the problem I see with a lot of organizations. You have a policy, you tell people where they are, you might go through them on an induction when they first start, if they have an induction, and then it's never communicated again. And so how do you expect people to remember everything that they're told in those first few days, which are often quite overwhelming when you start a job, if you never tell them again? So if you've got policies and processes that people are breaching, it's possibly time to just remind people of what they are and what the consequences are for a breach. But you can't punish someone for breaching a policy that they know nothing about.
Well, I was watching the netball yesterday, and one of the teams has let a quite a high profile, very successful player go, and it's very tight lipped about why she was let go. But there was also there was a little bit of controversy a couple of weeks before about something she'd said on social media. I think it was about gay relationships or something along those lines and how she didn't agree with it and whatever. And as I was watching the game, I thought, is that just common sense, or does that need to be something that goes across from a policy point of view and be like, these are the things that we don't talk about on social media because you are a part of our brand and all that sort of stuff. And it was really fascinating that I thought, I wonder how many of these professionals, even from a sporting perspective, have that or are aware of that responsibility from a front-facing point of view.
But then also, what are her values and what are the values of the team and the club?
Yeah.
And this is something that is so important to get right. When you're hiring someone, you want to be crystal clear that your values align.
Yeah.
Because when they don't, that's when you can have major issues. And, I'm sure a lot of your listeners have worked for somebody where there's been a values misalignment, whether it's been a client or whether it's been an employer. I know I certainly have. So it comes down to asking what are the questions you need to be asking, both as a customer or a potential customer, particularly if it's a long relationship, or as a company. Like, I know for me, I'm really selective about the people I work with.
Me too.
If we don't have a values alignment, then I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
And depends on the client that I'm working with, but if I'm taking on a client for a long-term project, I will do a deep dive into their social media, into their website. I will look to see who we know in common on LinkedIn, and I will ask the people who we know together what that person is like.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure that it's going to be a really positive working relationship for both of us.
And I think if we bring it back to the sales perspective of it, every single person we work with has the ability to refer people and on-sell us. Yeah. And every single person in your business that you work for, even if you're at a gathering on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon barbecue and someone says, tell me about your work. Yeah. Oh, I just do this, or I work for this company. Do you like it? Oh, it's just a job. That to me is not selling the company. That is not selling the vibe, the values, the beliefs, and everything that business has probably, and, from a head of the business perspective, everything that business owner has worked so hard to develop. You want those people to be singing your praises, to enjoy working with you, to create that level of passion and excitement for every business. I agree.
Absolutely. One of my mentors says your first sale needs to be to yourself. If you don't personally believe in the product that you're selling, then you are never going to be able to sell that successfully. Yeah. And I really absolutely believe in that. And I also believe that your second sale needs to be to your staff. If your staff don't passionately believe in what they're selling, particularly your sales team, they just see it as another job or an ends to a means, then they are never going to be as good as they could be at selling you or your business or your products because they don't genuinely believe in it. And so the question that you need to be thinking about is, how do I get them on board so that they are as passionate about what we do as I am, bearing in mind that no one's ever going to be as passionate about your business as you, but what's the next best thing? And that comes from communicating. That comes from sharing the value, sharing your passion, sharing your enthusiasm, sharing the history and the story behind how you came to be and how did you come up with this product? Like, what's the story behind it?